John, leading an ESOP company is certainly a unique responsibility. How does the ownership structure at Parametrix impact your leadership style, and how do you ensure that employees really feel connected to the company's success?
Thank you. I think leading an ESOP company, it is very unique. Our founder, who led a company that wasn't an ESOP and then very generously sold the company back to the employees, he and I have had he's still alive on our board, wonderful person. We've had some great conversations about what is it like leading the company when you were one of 5 principals, and what was it like after it sold to 100% of the employees? And he said, wow, I had to retrain myself.
Did you know that ESOP companies have been growing at a rate that's nearly 10% faster than traditional businesses? That's crazy, right? 10%. Employee stock ownership plans are not just a trend, but they are a game changer, especially in the civil engineering industry. Today, we're diving into the world of ESOPs and how they're reshaping the landscape of leadership and employee engagement. We'll be hearing from John Willis, licensed PE, President and CEO of Parametrix. He'll discuss the unique challenges and opportunities of leading an employee stock ownership plan, navigating some of the changes in our business environment, and the critical role of succession planning for ensuring long-term success in the consulting world. I'm your host, Anthony Fasano, and this is the Civil Engineering CEO. All right, now I'd like to welcome our guest onto the show for today. John Willis is a licensed professional engineer. He's also the president and CEO of Parametrix. John, welcome to the Civil Engineering CEO.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So, John, just to kind of get us going, maybe you can share a little bit about yourself and how you became kind of your path to president and CEO of Parametrix. I think anytime, I know a lot of civil engineers listen. Some of them aspire to be leaders in the industry, and they like to hear kind of the path or the journey of other leaders in the industry.
You bet. Thanks for asking. I am an engineer, have an engineering background, so started out doing engineering and design, mostly geotechnical and a lot of pavement, but branched out. My career path is not linear. I took a bunch of roles, both technical, project management, and line management, and sometimes would step back into a project manager role if the project was really like we won or was interesting. And so I'm not sure I had my sights set on being CEO, but over time started getting increasing levels of responsibility, whether that was client facing on a project or inside the company. And I used to work for a large multinational firm, came over to Parametrix about 8 years ago and was able to reset my career to be focused on clients and employees, and that meant recruiting, winning work, delivering work. It's been the best 8 years of my career. About 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to throw my hat in the ring for a CEO role. I was managing one of the regions here at Parametrix, and I got the job, and it's been wonderful. It's a big, vast role, but I like a lot of different things. I have a lot of different interests, and it feels like it's a fit. I'm pretty new still and still learning the role, but really glad I'm here. So that's a little bit of my background.
That's great. And you and I talked a little bit offline that you're also a mobile CEO, so you get really visiting the different locations and kind of moving around a bit. And I'm sure that I would imagine that that's helpful in terms of really understanding what the different offices, the challenges, and kind of the successes and what they're going through.
Yeah, I do travel a lot, and I absolutely love just people. In general, I really like to build relationships and connections, and so when I was asked where I would be located as the CEO, I said everywhere when I was interviewing, which was an easy answer, not to give the right answer in an interview, but rather I would be most effective by being in a lot of different places. And I think being part of a multinational firm helped me maybe de-emphasize geography a little bit in consulting. And I think that's I'm trying to bring that perspective here at Parametrix. Geography is important. We do want to anchor down in our communities. That's a big part of our purpose. But when we think about how we share resources, and we can talk about more of that later, or share skills, technology, to do that without geography being a hindrance. This is like our way of having our cake and eating it too, by being a very geographically focused firm that also understands the benefits of connecting across divisions and geographies and offices to really build and deploy teams that solve our clients' problems, regardless of where people sit.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that's a great philosophy. And I think for years that have gone past in our industry, there's always been there's that headquarters where kind of all the leaders are and kind of it's over there type of thing, So I think that the idea of having more mobile leadership can be really effective in terms of just everything you just said, essentially. And we even have a client, good sized firm, that's merging with another company, and some of their talks are talking about not having a headquarters. So, I think people are more thinking in the way that you kind of just described of, not being pinned down to a location, or at least seen as pinned down to a certain location from the high level leadership perspective, which I think is exciting. I think it's something new and interesting.
Yeah. I have not created all this in the year and a half I've been in the role. I've inherited. We were headed down this path, and maybe like a lot of firms, COVID and working remotely for that time really helped maybe nudge, not just us. We as consultants operate in service of our clients. And so as our clients became comfortable with us building these really dispersed teams, we Parametrix became more comfortable with having that mobile or dispersed management team. And I really think it's led to a lot of benefits. And I say all of this with the caveat that we are a regionally based P&L firm, and we have advantages of being in our communities. Our clients still want to see that we have offices here, that we have staff that are, whether it's, you're seeing your clients on a soccer field with, on a weekend at a game, or you're, donating to a charity like a STEM, something that's really lined up with our purpose. That's where the geography and the location does still matter. We don't want to abandon that. We just want to have our cake and eat it too, where the geography helps us with our purpose of building vibrant, sustainable communities. But our distributed nature helps us, as I like to say, punch above our weight class a little bit. We're 825 people, and we compete with firms 2 or 3 times our size, because I think we've really leveraged that ability to bring all the right people together in service of our clients' needs.
That's great. That's awesome. So, John, you've had 30 years of experience in the AE industry. I'm wondering how you've seen kind of the role of technology and innovation evolve in project management, and how maybe that has influenced your approach to leadership.
So I started, in 1994. That seems like a long time ago now, but it in some ways it seems like yesterday. At that time, I always have to go back there because basically I didn't even start with a computer on my desk, as crazy as that sounds. I had to go check out time to go do some design on these big VAX machines that we're running MicroStation and Inroads. And we got computers on our desk, and I was thinking, okay, this is going to make me way more efficient. And so I think there's people my age and younger naturally absorb any technology. I think as engineers, we try and be efficient, right?
Sure.
If we can do something quicker, better, more accurate with higher quality, we're going to use those tools. So to me, it's been ever present, this march of technology. And it's really easy to look at AI right now and think the exact same way of when PCs came in 30 years ago. Is it going to happen faster? Probably a lot faster. But the idea is that we still do the same things. In some ways, we're delivering projects like the Romans did 2,000 years ago, but how we deliver has to change. And so I think the challenge when you think about project management, even down to task management and technical tasks, is we Parametrix want to focus on leading through leveraging those durable skills, what we used to call soft skills. Those are just as important as the technical skills or the technology we're using, because I think using that technology without being able to be above it and be good consultants is really critical in project management. So we like to create an experience. We hear this from our client reviews that the Parametrix experience when clients work with us is unique and different. We're still trying to understand exactly what that secret sauce is so we can replicate it and scale it. But I think we want to elevate folks that support our clients with those differentiated skills. And is the technology there? Yes, it's a tool, it's a backdrop. It's not always what we lead with. And as AI is coming on board, I think it's really critical that we have people that understand how to use these co-pilots, and someday they'll be agents, right? These entire tasks can probably be run by AI. Right now, it's like having an intern. But I still think if we can hire and elevate and promote those people that can go above the technology, use it, but not make it front and center, I think our clients are still going to resonate with what we do. And that's, I think, the approach to I say picking leaders, but it's really like, who are we hiring? And, I have 2 children who are engineers also, and I'm telling them as they enter into this field, wow, it's going to look so different than anything I can even imagine. And just keep building those durable skills. Be a good consultant. Know when you're adding value and double down on that, because our clients are buying value regardless, even if the billing approach changes, if our way of making profit changes. At the end of the day, that value you bring as an engineer or a project manager is what you're ultimately going to get paid for. And anyhow, I don't know if I answered the technology question, but
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Everything is evolving very fast here. And I tell people all the time, the work you're doing today could look completely different in a couple of weeks, a couple of months. Everything is going very fast. So we need to be open and adaptable, I think, in the civil engineering industry. And I think going back to what you said, the leadership development is so important. It doesn't matter what software you're using, or we know AI is here to stay, but leadership development is important. And I will say that at EMI, we've done a lot of work with Parametrix to help with some people leadership and project management development programs. And I commend Parametrix for that. I think it does help. Like John said, that helps too, punch a little bit above kind of your weight grade there, because you're investing in your people and you're developing your people. And there's a commitment that goes along with that. But I think and sometimes you don't see the results right away because they have to learn and they have to grow over time. But we need to make that investment in our people, especially in the market that we're in, because it's a very competitive talent market. And it's just, I think it's one place where you can't really afford to cut right now is the leadership development, essentially.
Yeah.
It's critical. It's critical. So, John, I want to talk a little bit about ESOPs. Okay. For those of you not familiar, employee stock ownership plans. This is a business structure that allows for employees to be owners in an organization. So, John, leading an ESOP company is certainly a unique responsibility. How does the ownership structure at Parametrix impact your leadership style, and how do you ensure that employees really feel connected to the company's success?
That's great. Thanks for describing ESOPs. I realize it's not always, they're not always known. So thank you. I think leading an ESOP company, it is very unique. Our founder, who led a company that wasn't an ESOP and then very generously sold the company back to the employees, he and I have had he's still alive on our board, wonderful person. We've had some great conversations about what is it like leading the company when you were one of 5 principals, and what was it like after it sold to 100% of the employees? And he said, wow, I had to retrain myself. We had to become a much more highly participatory leadership team. And I came from another ESOP and came to this ESOP. There's a lot of different flavors of ESOP, but I think number one, if you lead with the notion that everybody you're engaging with inside the company is also an owner, you immediately, I think you get most of it. Again, that high level of participatory leadership, flipping the pyramid upside down. I'm here to support those teams that we're building. That's a different approach to leadership than a top-down command and control, which is not bad. It's just different. And you see other firms that have that approach. Sometimes it creates ambiguity. Like, we don't necessarily have that really strict top-down. So I think the ESOP lends itself to that. The upside is there's a ton of entrepreneurialism around the company. The downside is sometimes everybody can go out and be doing something. So you have to put some structures in place to have a little bit of sideboards of and this is what a strategic plan does. And when you do it well, you can say, here's where we're headed. And you try not to be too restrictive on all of those good ideas and that creativity that comes from these people that own the company. Like, I own a part of the company, everybody else does. It puts us all on an equal footing. But I think the role of a leader is to actually set the vision and provide some guidance, but not so much that it's stifling. Many people have a stake in the outcome too. So you get a lot of feedback that you might not see in another ownership model. So I will have some pretty, as one of my leaders likes to call them, crunchy conversations where people call me and they say, we made this investment over here, and I know that was a decision made at the leadership team. I don't think that was a good idea. And instead of, being offended by that, I say, this is awesome. Tell me more, because I think people are more comfortable speaking to the leadership inside of an ESOP because they have a right to. And I think it's a blessing. I think it's awesome. I'm glad that we have that. And the way to achieve sort of that, you got to keep people connected to the company's success, because they might see their piece of the stock or their division. And so in addition to having that open participatory leadership and open feedback, we have to have many channels of communication to reach out to folks. And this is probably not that different than other firms, but I think we're much more transparent with our financials. We have many channels of communication. So we have bagel breaks, virtual town halls that we do once a quarter. We try and make sure we're connecting. One of our core values is collaboration, trying to make sure people are collaborating, again, between offices, between regions, between divisions, so that we do sell the strength of the entirety of the company. And that's really critical. And I should have mentioned we have a bunch of core values. One of them is employee ownership. So we take it to heart, and it starts with leadership, that this is one of the most important things we value, is how we're structured. And I know other firms, they probably don't talk a lot about how they're structured. It's sort of always there, but it's in the background. Whereas with us, we lead with the advantages and the benefits for the ESOP. And that's been a really, really good thing. So it's a different way to lead. It's fun. I love it. It's participatory.
No, it's great. I'm glad to hear you talk through it, because I think like initially when you hear about it, you would say, well, why wouldn't I want to work at somewhere like that, right? Where you have ownership. But then to your point too, the leaders have to pay attention to certain things. Like you said, there's a lot more feedback. There's a lot of things to consider. Yes. So it sounds like it can be an awesome experience and a great place to work, as long as, it's structured properly. Like you said, some things have to be put in place to make sure you can really leverage that ESOP and the participation from all the employee owners, which is wonderful, which is awesome. And I would also say from a project management standpoint, and this is something that I've had the opportunity, of course, to work with some of your leaders on through the PM training we've been doing. It's also helpful in that regard, because when you're talking about project management, your project managers, not only do they want to drive profitable projects because their performance and their own evaluation and such, right, but they're owners in the company, exactly. Right? So, they want to drive profit. And so when we do PM training in an ESOP, we can explain to people that, listen, the better you manage your projects, the more profit the company makes. And ultimately, as ESOPs, as employee owners, you will be benefiting from that. So I think that they're also, from a learning and development standpoint, you can really see the motivation in the participants of the programs as owners and entrepreneurs, if you will, which from the trainer's perspective almost makes your job a little bit easier, because they're ready to go, right? They want to be profitable projects. They want to lead people as effectively as possible because of that ownership model. So that's something that I kind of appreciate about it from the other side, like looking at it for sure.
Yeah, so it's a virtuous cycle. It is brilliant. I'm really happy to be part of an ESOP.
So, John, with this increasing emphasis on remote work, how has kind of the shift in workplace culture affected, whether it's the type of projects that you undertake or the way you collaborate and deliver those projects? How has the shift to remote work impacted Parametrix?
In some cases, very well. In other cases, we had to be adaptable. Anybody that worked before the pandemic spent years, or maybe in my case, decades, learning how to work together on teams. And then immediately we had to learn how to work separated apart. But being a mid-sized firm and building these virtual teams that I talked about, whether it's leadership teams or project-focused teams, client-focused teams, I think it's giving mid-sized firms, once you figure out how to do it, I think you get, being a mid-sized firm, virtual teams allow us to flex our size better and compete better. That's my favorite part of what came out of COVID. So we get much more greater access to talent. And it's not just us, it's the firms we partner with. We're really building these networks. And I think we're seeing a shift in the industry. And I'll say this because I came from a firm where we could say we have 25,000 people around the globe. Let us bring whatever is needed for you, client. And right. I think we can now say, especially when we think about how we partner and our own firm, we can say we can bring these resources to you, just like a really large firm. And I know large firms are figuring it out really well too, and they have a lot more resources to do all this. So I'm not saying that we're doing it uniquely, but I just think it's kind of leveling the playing field amongst firms of all sizes. And so that the access is greater, right? We have access to just about anybody now. And especially with some of our municipal clients, I think they used to want us to sit right next to them. Are you in that town? Can you be here in 15 minutes? And now it's like, well, we can be here in 15 seconds, right? So I think it's changing the perception. So our clients are changing, we're changing. And so with all that access, that's the upside. I think that the quality of collaboration does sometimes suffer. I'm hearing stories, people say, well, I used to walk through the hallway and I get some mentoring from a senior person, or we don't, that we're losing something by not laying down a bunch of stuff on a table or on a screen in a room together. So I totally understand that too. I'm not trying to paint too rosy of a picture, but I think what it means is there's a reason for us to learn how to collaborate and mentor better than we are right now in a virtual setting. I think we still know how to do it really well in person. But again, if you have all this access, if we do this better than we are today, the mentoring could take a step up as well. All the mentoring and training, on the job training that we do. So I still feel a lot of promise. I see a lot of promise in these remote work setups and hybrid work setups because the upside is so great. We just have to put the time and energy to figure out how to mentor, how to train, especially for the junior level group, especially the ones that started during the pandemic. I think we owe it to that next generation. And I don't think as an industry, we're crushing it yet. I think we've got to work harder on this part. So access is good. Quality isn't always where it used to be.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of like, we went from working on Teams to working on Microsoft Teams.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was like a little bit of adjustment. But I do agree with you that one of the biggest benefits is we've kind of removed the geographic limits in terms of hiring and finding talent and subject matter experts, which I think can be very valuable in a client-driven world where if you need a certain level of expertise and you couldn't find them in your community before, well, now we can.
Right.
Like you said, you could be there in 15 seconds with that person, which is great. But at the same point, I agree with you. I think the biggest downside of it has been the loss of that mentoring and that mentorship and that, hey, can I look over your shoulder? Can I sit in the conference room with you when you do this client call or something along those lines? And so I know that there are still ways around that, but I agree with you. I think we need to get better at it. I know some of the companies that we work with, they've done a pretty good job of maintaining a remote atmosphere, but also trying to get people together from time to time wherever they can. And I know that's not always easy, but I do think that some kind of a hybrid mix can be beneficial.
Right.
But listen, it's the way of the future. And I think the firms that are embracing it and trying to make it work, to your point, with both sides of the coin the best we can to try to keep the quality up where we can, but still have that access is going to be really the key to growing a firm in the future. 100%.
And I'm not going to say my name on this podcast, but I'm going to say, if we want to learn how to increase the quality of our collaboration, talk to people who started during the pandemic. They might not have seen what it was like before, but they were going to have some amazing insights. I've learned a lot by talking to folks who've just been in the industry 3 or 4 or 5 years, and including my daughter who started in August of 2020. And so that was, I learned from her. I'm learning from our employee owners here at Parametrix, that have started. They have some wants and desires to be mentored and to be trained. And I'm trying to ask the right kind of open-ended questions, like, well, what does that look like in person? What does it look like virtually? And learning so much. But I think if a management team's trying to solve it with people over 50 years old, they're missing a really important demographic, and they're going to be suboptimal in how they embrace remote and hybrid. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point because that's the only thing that they know, right? So they can think through it in that fashion. And what's interesting to me about the whole COVID and remote work thing is, and I started, the first 15 years of my career working as a land development engineer for a consulting firm. And at the time, like nobody ever would have thought that anybody could work remotely ever, right? Because it was like, no, we got to be here. We got to print the plans, we got to sit around the table. And then in March 2020, overnight, 95% of civil engineering companies go remote. So I think that when you're pushed, you can get results, but we just have to continue to optimize it and get the feedback from people at all different experience levels, especially those like you suggest that really that's all they know, because that's what they're thinking. So I think that's a great way to approach it. So John, succession planning is really crucial for any organization. What are some of the key factors that you consider when developing future leaders at Parametrix, and how do you ensure a smooth transition in those leadership roles?
Good. First of all, I think there's 2 parts of being a leader in a consulting firm. There's the client-facing part. Can you run projects? Can you, quality, delivery, schedule, budget, all the stuff that you all do such a great job talking about on your podcasts. That's a really important part of leadership. It has to be enhanced with understanding the operations. And I can say it for myself. I've run P&Ls, I've run projects. And a year and a half ago, when I got into the CEO role, I got to learn what it was like to run a company. It's a different set of skills on the operations and finance side. So I think as we pick leaders, giving them, seeing people that are curious about that, what's beyond sort of the realm that I'm in charge of now, I thinking about operations and that's important. Can you run a part of the company? But maybe even more important than that, culture, adaptability, and flexibility. I know it's a bit of a theme earlier. We have to pick leaders that are going to be running the company 10 years from now. We don't know what that's going to look like exactly. We can prognosticate all we want, but the people that can understand the culture of the company, why the ESOP makes Parametrix so special, why we have this unique experience with our clients, how do we keep that going 10 years from now? Even if the tools and the approach and even the types of clients, the ways we get paid, that might change, but somebody understands sort of how the company runs, and then that understanding the culture and adaptability those are the things we're looking for. So we're investing more now on succession planning at all levels than we have before, partly because we're growing and we need to, but partly because I think it's really important to create a bunch of leaders. I think if you do it well, they'll stay with the company. But even if they don't, I've been in this business long enough that if you're building the skill sets of everybody, they become clients sometimes. So you get to work with people who are skilled up as clients. They even go to competitors, and we do a ton of partnering at Parametrix. We've got instant collaboration with someone who maybe used to work here. And I'm not arguing against trying to keep our voluntary retention low, because we do work on that quite a bit to keep people here. But I just think skilling up your workforce and creating those stretch assignments and making succession planning almost less of a process and more of just a way you breathe, sort of like learn something, maybe do it a few times over, clear your plate, get out of the way, and leave space for someone else to come in. That's the culture we need to grow as an industry, and we're working on that here at Parametrix. So I think that's it. As far as smooth transition, I'm thinking of a project I worked on actually just about 6 years ago. We brought in a new project manager who had been an agency person and came over to consulting for the first time. She was a natural fit. It just worked out great. But you have to have some overlap and transition. And I'll just speak for myself. I've been guilty at times of like, okay, you got it? And I run off and do the next thing. And people are like, wait, I need some more guidance. So I think it's important to ensure that you've got like both schedule and skills overlap for that person. And I think that's where I've messed up before. That's where I think the industry, we're on to the next project or the next client. And I think we have to invest and take the time to make sure we do, we do that well, because it's so easy not to, because we're always in a hurry. We've always got more work than we know what to do with. So yeah, that's critical for transition. Just invest in it, take the time, put extra people on it if you have to. But the rewards are so great. It's like an investment now, and the payoff comes later. I know from experience.
Yeah, and I think that's why this is such a big differentiator in the industry. Firms that do this well are the firms that really can grow sustainably, because I think of exactly what you just said, because sometimes the payoff, you don't see it immediately. So you have to be willing to commit to it, invest in it, and know that if you put a good process in place and train people, they're going to grow over time, and it's really going to come back to benefit you. And I think one analogy I can give our listeners who maybe doing more technical work that you could think about is, when you start as a project manager, you get a project or two, a small project you're working on. But then as you grow, you're kind of getting back more into program management, right? Yeah. Where you're managing multiple projects and multiple PMs, kind of like going back to what John said a few minutes ago. Like, can you operate a larger part of the company? And so I think that if you're a leader in the industry and you're thinking about developing leaders, that's kind of what you have to think about, is upping their level of responsibility to see, how much they can handle at this point in their career. And yeah, I think when you do that, you start to see like, wow, this person, they really handled this really well, and they're looking for more, and it's kind of like trusting them, giving them a shot at it, being there to help them, but letting them try it and see how it goes. And that's something that I think you have to allow that to develop, with being there, as John suggested, to help them and guide them, but they have to kind of do it. That's the key. And if they do it, then they'll get better.
That's a really important point. The succession planning is, there's got to be energy coming from both sides. People need to want the stretch assignment as much as you want to actually create those opportunities for folks as well. So I'm glad you added that, Anthony.
So John, in a growing company, kind of maintaining a strong connection to core values can get kind of challenging. You mentioned your values before. As you grow, it can become a little bit difficult. So how do you ensure that as Parametrix expands and grows, that the company values kind of do remain at the forefront of decision-making and operations?
It's a great question. I came to Parametrix 8 years ago because of the purpose of building vibrant and sustainable communities, and because of the core values of the company. And so I do wake up a lot of days worrying about, as we're having some pretty phenomenal growth right now. We want to make sure we do maintain that, as your question asked. So our core values matter. They are front and center with how we communicate about ourselves, our clients, and our employee owners. So I think it's important to start at the top. I have to espouse the values, the core values every day in the company, ask the leadership team. And again, everybody's an owner. We're asking every employee owner to live up to our core values. One of the ways we do that is we do core value awards. A lot of companies have awards. We do look at some of our core values like fun, compassion, collaboration, integrity, inclusion, client service. I'm going to say them all probably, but we have all these great core values and we give awards out based on that. Those are then promoted not only at an office level, but on our company website. So you get to see who's living up to the core values. That's one very tactical thing we do, but it has a nice impact. Another thing we do is we pick an employee of the year every year. And right this year, we opened it up to nominate across the company rather than, a few years ago it was by office, which was limiting. And so we have an employee of the year that's selected, one employee. We actually have like 60, 70 nominees this year, which is amazing. And one employee of the year gets selected. That person gets to attend an ESOP conference and also sits at our board meetings 4 times a year. So this is a really big deal. So this can be somebody from anywhere organizationally, somebody who's an administrative assistant to someone who is a division manager, can be an employee of the year. And that sitting on the board is a really important part of what we do. And so we do reinforce the core values there. That person at the board meeting is then talking about the tenor of employee ownership and the employee culture and the core values inside of the company. So that's their contribution to the board meeting once a quarter. And those are just some of the ways we reinforce it. But I think for starters, it's not that complicated. You just have to talk about core values. And I've had a few hairy decisions I've had to deal with in the role. I do push a lot of decisions closer to the action, but sometimes they come on my desk. And when I'm really stuck, it sounds corny, but I actually go to our core values and say, how is this impacting our core values? Does it align? If it does, that might help me make a yes decision. If it doesn't, it's real easy to say no, or vice versa, depending on what the question is. So that's important. And I think I'm not going to say we haven't figured it out as we're expanding, because we're actually just expanding geographically as we speak. I traveled to that location earlier this week. And I think one of the ways to make sure we ensure core values in these, I don't want to call them outposts, but new sort of frontiers for the company geographically, is to link up a long tenured Parametrix person to be the sponsor. And we'll still have, other functions tied in, but we have one person. We're doing that right now. And we're going to make sure that person focuses on our core values amongst a bunch of other things, doing the integration to make sure that happens. But if I could just expand a little more, we want the core values to be the same all over the company, but I'm very careful to not talk about culture that way, because I think culture needs to evolve, whether it's, over time it'll evolve. As we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, cultures evolve. These are good things for the culture not to be static. And also if you're in Albuquerque or you're in Seattle, there's going to be a different culture in each of those offices because where you're located. So I like to think of the core values as very foundational and pretty rigid, whereas the culture I think of as very fluid. And that's sort of the concept I always have when I think about what are we expanding as we grow and move into new markets, new geographies, and with new practices. Let's focus on those core values rather than having a discussion about culture, which is like grasping at fog. It's a really hard discussion to have. And let's just acknowledge that the culture is really the stories we tell about ourselves, but the core values can be really, really focused in those areas I identified earlier.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I mean, it's almost like you have a sports team and you have offense and defense and special teams, and they all have the same values, but each of the units might have kind of their own culture, right? They mesh together, right, and they hang out together a little bit more. And so I like the idea of being a little flexible there with the culture side of it. But the values, I really like what you said as well, talking about them, doing initiatives around them. And really, like you said, even sometimes when there's a big decision to be made, going back to your values and saying, if we make a decision one way or the other, how does that, related or aligned with our values, I think is kind of the ultimate measurement of whether or not you're kind of adhering to those values and living them out. So I think that that's a great approach there and way to think about it. So earlier, John, you mentioned COVID, and the pandemic certainly has altered the workforce landscape. How has Parametrix kind of adapted to these changes? And what are some of the kind of key trends that you're seeing that's shaping the future of work in the AE industry?
Okay. Yeah, I think I talked about some of this, but I'll expand on a few more areas. I talked about delivery and collaboration earlier. We're definitely seeing that change, and it's mostly been really positive. I'm absolutely loving what I'm seeing. Recruiting and onboarding talent has changed. We have 17 offices in 7 states, but we have employee owners in 32 states. So just let that settle in. So we're having business licenses and certifications. It's probably driving our HR team crazy, all the places we're located, because you don't just have someone sit somewhere. You have to make sure you can do business in those states, even if you don't have an office. And there's a lot of certification that goes along with that. So, but again, it's opened up a whole new group of talent that we wouldn't have seen. In some cases, it's really enhanced our recruiting and DEI metrics as far as who we're bringing into the company. I'm so excited to have a more diverse team delivering for our clients and also helping internally as we run the company. I think we all know that's really good for the company, good for the bottom line. So that's been positive. Some other trends, we talk about all the stuff we're doing virtually, but maybe you've talked about this in other podcasts, but ironically, the in-person events are becoming more important because it might be the only time that people will collaborate in person, whether that's on a project. I'm really trying to emphasize some of our project managers have some more in-person meetings than you would have had, 10 years ago, because it's not happening inside the office. So you might need to figure out ways to bring your team together. Not all the time. I get that there's costs and some clients don't want to pay for that. At Parametrix, we do a company party every year. We do it during October to celebrate employee ownership. And so we bring every employee can come, and we reimburse for a majority of the travel costs for another person to come with them, a +1.
Yeah.
And what I'm finding that those parties are taking on more significance since about 2022 or 2023, because you're seeing groups get together, especially with the larger geographic footprint we have now. They're getting together, they're meeting the day before the party, taking advantage of that travel that we've already invested in, and having groups like whether it's GIS or a structures group. We have these groups get together, and some groups are getting together to go for bike rides or play soccer. We have an active transportation group that I think is looking to do a bike ride. We do it in the Seattle area, our company party. So it's expensive. I even get questioned by other employee owners, should we be spending the money doing this? Because it's our money, right? And I've actually characterized it in terms of, well, it's actually less expensive than the write-off we had on that really big project. Back to project management, right, Anthony? Like there's other ways we can break glass and burn a lot more money. This one at about, I think it's about $600 per head. It's an investment we collectively, this isn't just my decision, but we collectively are going to continue to do as we grow. And I get that it's expensive, but and not everybody goes to the company party, which is helps lower the cost. I'd love it if everybody went. I'd love it if we couldn't even find a venue so big. That'd be a great problem to have. But that's one of those in-person things that I'm seeing having more importance after the pandemic than it did before. And so I'm trying to understand, like, okay, should we be really thinking about in-person events a little more because of the extensive remote work that we have? And I know that, we talked about mentoring too, so I won't reiterate that here, but I think we've got to really learn how to develop our workforce in this new model. Like I said, I don't think anybody's quite figured it out. I'm going to be very honest and say we certainly haven't, but I think there's more work for us to do to make sure that mentoring, collaboration, on-the-job training is happening. And even if it's happening, I'd like it to happen even with better quality than it happened before the pandemic. That's my goal and my dream.
That's great. Yeah. And I mean, I'm a huge proponent of getting people together in person. I mean, we at EMI, we've been remote for most of our existence, but last year we acquired a building and a headquarters. And a lot of people said to me, why would you spend money on a headquarters? You don't need it. And we've been bringing people in regularly together for meetings. And I mean, the ideas that we generate together when we're sitting around a table, the relationships that we're building when we spend a few days together, I think has been worth a ton. It's really invaluable to put a price on it. So I think it's great that you invest in getting everyone together once a year to build those relationships, which I think is a big part of growing a company, long term, that camaraderie and what goes along with that. So that's great.
Well,
all right, John, last question that I got for you.
okay.
You are a civil engineer, bachelor's, master's. You had a career, like you mentioned earlier on, in engineering. You're now a leader in the industry, CEO, leader. We have a lot of engineers that watch our show that are starting out in the technical like we all do, but they aspire to be leaders in the industry. So just wondering if you could give some personal advice or feedback from your own leadership journey onto, what you would recommend for technical professionals to do to be able to become leaders, like whether it's a certain skill development or any advice that you can share from kind of your leadership journey for aspiring leaders in our industry.
Yeah, you bet. I mentioned earlier, my career was not a direct linear path. Like I did this, then I got here. I took a bunch of twists and turns, and I'm convinced that while it looked like I had somebody tell me, wow, you took a step backwards. I'm like, no. I took a step sideways and forward. We just don't know it yet. I don't even know it yet. And all those things I learned by being in a bunch of different places, I have leveraged all of that in this current role and roles prior because I've seen so much. So lead with curiosity rather than some sort of ambition that is on an up and to the right path. It doesn't exist. That path, that straight path of doing this and getting that doesn't exist. I'll tell you that. And I can say that for both working in a 25,000 person company versus working in a company the size of Parametrix. So don't go linear. Explore whatever options are. You never know until you look backwards like I am at this age. I'm really glad I did that. Try and work in different locations too, if you can. I had an opportunity to work in Portland before I moved to Portland. I started in Seattle, had an opportunity to work in Alaska. Later on, I got a regional role, and I had all these built-in relationships in this company. And somebody said in my interview, wow, that's really great. You did all that work, as if I had intentionally done it. It was almost accidental, but it really, really played well. So that's one. You hear this all the time, but surround yourself with people smarter than you. You, as a civil engineer, might have a desire to know it all and be able to figure out everything. And it's a very curious group. We are a very curious group. So you try and learn everything, but you can't lead a company if you're trying to do everything. So you surround yourself with some really smart people, whether it's finances or project delivery or you name it. This is like the lifeblood of a successful leader. And so I think that's really, that's maybe my second piece of advice. So the third one is, I think the true measure of a leader is what happens when you're not around. So set the vision and set the direction, because I think, people try and, you've seen people I'll dial in on vacation, or I know I'm a project manager, but I'm also a structural engineer. So I'm going to be leading the bridge task. Try and let go of that and try and lead and set the example. And what happens if you're on vacation or you take family leave, maybe you're gone for like 3 or 4 or 5 or 8 weeks. What happens while you're gone? Or if you're a CEO that's flitting around all these different locations, are you setting the vision and setting the expectations so that the team can run autonomously without you? So those are sort of the big ones for me. It's, it's not a linear career path. Explore a lot and be curious. Surround yourself with people smarter than you that have different experiences. There's a diversity angle in there as well. And then finally, you get the idea. So this has been my playbook, but finally don't, sorry, go ahead. I interrupted you, Anthony.
No. I mean, I think what I've taken away from our conversation here that's been enlightening in a way is you need to talk to a lot of different people in your career. You mentioned your daughter who started during COVID. You mentioned all the different employee owners at Parametrix that you're able to get feedback from. Yeah. And, you've talked early on about the previous owner of Parametrix that you had a lot of mentoring and guidance and talking with. So I think kind of a big takeaway that I think we've heard throughout our conversation today is, and this is really, I think, helpful advice for those technical professionals out there that want to grow, is that you can get advice from people at different experience levels and different ages, right? You don't have to just think about, hey, I got to talk to the CEO of my company now because I want to become a high-level leader. And so I would encourage that philosophy for everyone in the industry. I've had my own success in doing that as well, getting those different perspectives and being flexible in your career. And like John said, sometimes you take a step sideways Sometimes it feels like backwards, but ultimately, if you surround yourself with the right people and you give yourself the opportunity, I think, to try different things, float around, as John suggests, you're going to build a lot of different skill sets. You're going to gain a lot of experience. And I think you'll be able to use that in your career time and again in our industry, which is variable. I mean, like we said, one of the first things John said is it's fast moving. You're going to be doing all different stuff throughout your career, and all these experiences will help you for sure. So, John, I want to thank you for taking some time out of your day, spending some time with us here on the Civil Engineering CEO. You gave us some awesome insights, and I really appreciate getting to spend some time with you here today. I
was flattered to be asked, so thank you, Anthony, and wasn't sure what I was going to say, but it's been a great conversation. So thank you very much, and I don't think I have anything else to say, but I appreciate it.
Thank you, John. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with John. He gave us some awesome insights into how to grow a company, but also how to grow yourself as a leader in the engineering world. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe to our channel here. We do put out videos like this on a weekly basis to help engineers become better managers and leaders. I'll see you next week.